The New York Knicks' current situation is a lot better than most casual NBA fans think. The Knicks have missed the playoffs for 7 straight seasons, and they've made several foolish moves that have set them back as a franchise. But if you look at the Knicks' assets at the moment, this is a team that could easily find themselves in the playoffs in just 2 seasons. This isn't a team with a ton of young talent, but they have two solid building blocks between RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. Along with that, the Knicks have 3 upcoming draft picks, which will allow them to add some key young players that they can add to their young core. They could have a large amount of cap room going into this offseason. In fact, if the Knicks decline all their team options, they'll have the second most cap room in the league this summer, right behind the Atlanta Hawks at $45 million. If the Knicks are smart with that cap space, they can use it to make themselves a way better team going forward. But they can't make any more Julius Randall signings. So in this video, I'm going to break down how the Knicks can find themselves in the playoffs in just 2 seasons. We're not going to make any crazy unrealistic 2K trades, just smart moves that moves this team going forward. But before we continue, if you like videos like this, please like and subscribe as your support helps me to make more dope content. Now let's continue. In order for the Knicks to get themselves in the playoffs in 2 years and eventually become a title contender, they need to focus on rebuilding properly. One of the statements that people often say to clown the Knicks is that they've been rebuilding for 20 years. But the reality is, the reason why the Knicks are where they are today is because they refuse to rebuild. Over the past 2 decades, the Knicks have traded multiple first-round picks for veterans only for it to totally backfire. It's because of this why the Knicks are always mediocre. Even when the Knicks traded for Carmelo Anthony back in 2011, because they gave up all their assets for him, the Knicks only had a little bit of short-term success and then were awful for 7 straight years. The Knicks need to focus on laying a strong foundation first, which means developing a young core. Once you've done that, then you look to sign all-star free agents. But if you trade assets for a veteran, you're skipping steps which will give you short-term benefits but long-term consequences. This is why in this rebuild, we're not going to go star hunting. We're not pulling all our assets together to land a premier player like Joel Embiid, Devin Booker, or any of the other stars that the Knicks have been linked to. Instead, we're going to focus on developing our young core. So first, we need to focus on the draft that's now set to happen on November 18th. Best case scenario for the Knicks, in my opinion, is Killian Hayes, but he more than likely won't be there at pick number 8. So instead, we're going to draft Kyrie Lewis Jr. out of Alabama. He's exactly what the Knicks need because he gives them a good point guard, which the Knicks have not had in forever. The Knicks actually have interviewed Kyrie Lewis Jr. His coach/trainer has said that he believes Kyrie's speed and perimeter shot will make him a good fit on the Knicks. Kyrie has decent size for the point guard position at 6'3" with a 6'7" wingspan. One of his concerns was the fact that he was so skinny at just 165 pounds, but since the college season ended, it's been reported that Kyrie has put on 15 pounds. Kyrie is a perfect fit for the Knicks in my opinion. He's one of the fastest guards in this draft, which helps him excel at getting into the lane, but he also has a good outside shot to balance his inside game as he hit 37% from 3 this year. At pick number 8, Kyrie may be considered a reach by some, but I think he's a good fit with the Knicks' current crop of players, and I think he's a better player than both Tyrese Haliburton and Cole Anthony, 2 point guards that are ranked ahead of him. The Knicks also have the 27th pick and 38th pick in this upcoming draft. With the 27th pick, I'm going to select Paul Reed out of DePaul. Reed is an athletic 6'9" power forward with a 7'2" wingspan. Reed is a great defender and rebounder. He can handle the ball, and he's even flashed the ability to stretch it from deep. Part of the reason he isn't projected to go high in this draft is that he's already 21 years old, but he's a great project for the Knicks to take on. He possibly won't be in the rotation next year, but he's a great player for the Knicks to develop. He should play a lot of time in the G League next year, and if developed properly, I think he could be a Pascal Siakam level player. With the 38th pick, I'm taking Casha Stanley. Stanley is another project who, if developed properly, can become a really good pro. He's got good size for the 2 guard position at 6'6", and he's the most athletic player in the draft with a monstrous 48-inch vertical. but his skills on the court are underwhelming. This is another player that the Knicks need to play in the G League so he develops his game, but if developed properly, he could be a very good player. This is a pretty good draft for the Knicks. Now, they're not walking away with a can't-miss player, but they just landed potentially their long-term point guard of the future, while also adding 2 projects who could become excellent players down the line. Now we move on to free agency. The Knicks can have $45 million in cap room, but that's only if they opt out of every player's team option from last year's free agent signings. Just about all of last year's signings were duds, but I will keep Reggie Bullock because he's dirt cheap at $4 million, and he's a pretty good 3-and-D player. This still gives the Knicks about $40 million in cap room to work with. The Knicks badly need shooters, so a player that the Knicks should get is Danilo Gallinari. Gallo is one of the best stretch bigs in today's league. He shot 40% from 3 this year on a high volume 7 attempts a game. He's also a pretty good scorer at almost 19 points a game this season. Gallinari is 32, so he's going to look to get paid. I will give him a 3-year, $60 million deal with just the first 2 years guaranteed, similar to what the Knicks gave Julius Randle last year. This is a good deal for the Knicks because he upgrades their starting 4 spot while not being on the books long term. Joe Harris is another elite sniper that the Knicks should look to get. He led the league in 3-point percentage last year, and this year he was still elite at 42% from 3 on 6 attempts a game. He's also expanded his game to the point where he's a legit scorer. If you watch the Nets in the bubble this year, he's a major part of the reason the Nets went 5-3 with an undermanned roster. Harris can really put the ball on the floor and get to the rim and score. Harris has already said he wants to stay with the Nets, but he's also going to look to get paid. I'd also give him about a 3-year, $60 million contract. I'd also look to re-sign Damian Dotson to about a 3-year, $14 million deal, as he's a good 3-and-D player. The last player I'd look to sign is Tyson Chandler. I know he's washed now, but he'd be a pretty good mentor for Mitchell Robinson, as he's a former Defensive Player of the Year. After these additions, the Knicks starting 5 next year should be Kyra, RJ, Joe Harris, Gallinari, and Mitchell Robinson. This is such a better starting lineup than last year's travesty. With 2 elite shooters in the front court, RJ Barrett and Kyra Lewis will have driving lanes and will be able to run pick and roll with Mitch. The Knicks offense should look so much better next year. The bench unit is pretty uncertain, but hopefully young guys like Frank Ntilikina, Kevin Knox, and even Ignas Brazdeikis can produce on the second unit. Randall should be next year's 6th man. Randall was a disappointment this year, but I think that was in large part due to Fizdale giving Randall a role that he really shouldn't be playing. Randall is not any NBA team's #1 option. If Randall was to embrace the 6-man role, I think he could be one of the top bench scorers in the league. If the young players show some growth, this could be a solid second unit. So how will this roster perform next year? That's hard to determine. The Knicks can expect to get good production from the vets, but a lot of the team's success depends on the growth of the young players. RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson need to make a leap. Kyra Lewis Jr. needs to have a good rookie year. The Knicks did hire some player development coaches, so I do expect to see promise from the Knicks young players, but I don't necessarily expect anyone to have an all-star year. So, if the Knicks young players show modest growth and the vets they added play well, I'm projecting a 33-win season. This is a pretty nice jump from this season. Obviously, Knicks fans want to make the playoffs, but next season really shouldn't be about making the playoffs. It should be more about player development. If guys like RJ and Mitch improve as players, that's a huge win. Because the Knicks have a roster of mostly young players, if they grow internally, there's a chance they can make the playoffs the following year. Next, we have the 2021 NBA Draft. I won't spend too much time talking about the 2021 draft because the current draft projections will be radically different a year from now. I'm sure Knicks fans want the top prospects like Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green, but if the Knicks finish with 33 wins, they're probably looking at another 7 through 10 pick. The 2021 NBA Draft is expected to be loaded, so the Knicks more than likely will miss out on the top picks, but they still have a chance to draft a very good player. Next, we move on to 2021 NBA free agency. The Knicks have several players on the roster whose contracts will expire by then. Julius Randle has a team option for almost $20 million, but luckily, only $4 million of that is guaranteed, so unless Randall has an all-star campaign, expect the Knicks to opt out of that money. Dennis Smith Jr. is another player who's on his way out. Unless DSJ makes a huge jump, expect the Knicks to let him walk if he's not already traded by that point. Frank Ntilikina will also be a free agent in 2021. Frank has turned into a really good defender, but if he can't improve his offense, he's just a defensive specialist. Whether I re-sign Frank or not will depend on how he plays this season. If Frank can up his three-point percentage to a league average rate while improving as a scorer and playmaker, I'm willing to give him a 3 to 4 year extension. If Frank doesn't improve or spends the entire year hurt again, I'm just going to let him walk. Mitch may be the Knicks' most important free agent that offseason. I already made an entire video on Mitch's contract situation where I said the Knicks need to try to extend Mitch now. If he's not extended, he will be a restricted free agent in 2021. We're going to bring Mitch back next offseason, hopefully on a reasonable deal. As for signing free agents, 2021 is projected to be a star-studded free agency. The Knicks likely won't get any of the top stars like Giannis, Kawhi, or LeBron. The Knicks will probably go after them, but there simply will be better teams with cap room that will be a better destination than the Knicks are. If the Knicks do pursue these guys, expect them to strike out. Instead, we're going to make a modest signing in Gordon Hayward, who is set to be a free agent in 2021. When healthy, Hayward is still a very good player. He could come off the bench and be an excellent spark plug or even start. If Knox doesn't make a leap, this is a good pickup. Going into the 2021 to 2022 season, if the young players improve and Hayward is a good addition, this should be a 45-win team and a roster that's good enough to make the playoffs. And once the Knicks are a winning team, they will be good enough to legitimately attract a superstar free agent. And that's how I think the Knicks can get themselves back in the playoffs in just 2 seasons. Instead of going star hunting, if they prioritize the development of their young players, their individual development will result in an increase of wins. I do believe the Knicks should sign veterans, but they need to be veterans that complement the young players on the team. That means getting shooters who spread the floor for RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson so they have room to operate. If the Knicks follow this plan, there's no reason why they shouldn't at least be a 7th or 8th seed in the next 2 years. And with that said, that's going to be the end of the video. Do you agree with my moves? Tell me in the comment section. Don't forget to like and subscribe and enjoy the rest of your day.